Part 4. The order to disband and mesh back into civilian life was the most difficult one that Jamie had ever had to follow. Having your spirit crushed in a few moments and then asked to give up is not what Jamie expected when she walked into that bunker. Walking out of it and walking away from a rebellion that no longer was one, Jamie had to find a new path. Major Washing sent out the coded message after learning that most of the command structure of the rebel forces was wiped out in a coordinated missile strike. All of the planet's original defense forces still in rebellion against the Jade Falcons were to destroy any existing evidence of their participation and meld back into society. This was easier said than done in some cases, as many of the rebels had never registered with the clanners to receive their occupational and civil status cards. Jamie had to cobble together enough money to purchase forged paperwork that showed that she grew up in a small agricultural village and had a clear past. It allowed her to obtain an entry-level job at a warehouse unpacking trucks. It was boring and tiring work that left Jamie with very little beyond a base level of existence. Occasionally, while walking down the street, she would see someone that she recognized from before that terrible day, but it was too risky to talk or even acknowledge their existence. Everyone was too wary of blowing their cover to someone who might be working for the Falcons. Even among coworkers, Jamie kept to herself. She avoided eating lunches with others and would often spend her breaks in the restroom. The daily grind was made all the more intolerable by the fact that she now felt like a cog within a machine that controlled the people of her planet. Every box that she unloaded felt like self-harm. Jamie began to fantasize about taking bold action. One afternoon, while chewing on something that vaguely resembled a peanut butter sandwich, she watched an industrial mech across the street lift steel girders into place for welders. She wondered how difficult it would be to pilot one of those things. She could cause a lot of damage with one before the Falcons cut her down. This seed of an idea began to grow, and Jamie felt driven for the first time in 2 years. Working within the system to do something, anything that might hurt the Falcons, Jamie obtained a work transfer pass to construction, and after digging ditches for several months, she flirted with the contemptible foreman there enough that he sent her to an industrial mech piloting school in the capital city of Imus. The train ride into Imus was intimidating, as Jamie had never visited the city before. The huge buildings seemed to touch the upper atmosphere as she walked through the busy streets. Everyone moved quickly on the streets, as if driven by caffeine and greed. Jamie felt sick to her stomach seeing so many people who seemed to go on with their lives no matter who was in charge. She often wondered if she would be the same if she had been born into one of the higher working classes instead of being the daughter of a couple of iron miners. 3 months of industrial piloting school gave Jamie a renewed purpose. The desire to use an industrial mech to cause mayhem in an utterly futile, violent gesture faded. What grew in its place was a desire to build personal skills in piloting these mechs so that one day she might be able to pilot a battle mech and fight the Falcons on equal footing. Of course, Jamie had no idea how she would ever accomplish such a feat, but it kept her going in these long days of pilot training and the long evenings of book study. Living a solitary life in the dorm, Jamie celebrated her 19th birthday alone, but feeling better than she had since the end of the rebellion. She looked at herself in the little wall mirror and could make out the determination in her gray-blue eyes. Her Falcon instructors mistook it as a youthful enthusiasm for industrial mech piloting, but every day, Jamie felt her potential grow. After 1 year, Jamie was certified as an industrial mech pilot and transferred to a construction site near a coastline where a mine was being built. She was one of a dozen pilots assigned to rotate through 9 industrial mechs in shifts. The Falcons wanted this mine up quickly, so that work took place around the clock. Jamie still tried to keep to herself, however some connections with her fellow pilots inevitably formed. One in particular was a woman named Kylie, who was at least a decade older than Jamie, but showed a level of enthusiasm for the job and life that made Jamie jealous. She wished that she could be as excited to crawl out of the bunk each day. However, Jamie appreciated that Kylie would dominate every conversation and take some of the pressure off of Jamie in her continuing attempt to remain in the back of any room in which she walked. One afternoon, Jamie was just getting off of her shift when she walked into the pilot barracks and saw everyone crowded around the holoviewer in the rec area. Curiosity won out, and Jamie made her way over to the small gathering of pilots watching what was immediately identifiable as a Solaris 7 match. The garish paint jobs and aftermarket mods of the mechs made Jamie's eyes roll. Still, it wasn't every day that someone managed to sneak a mech fight vid planetside. Jamie watched, identifying the mechs as a Hatchetman and a Vindicator. The Hatchetman was painted royal purple with white streaks across its torso like a claw mark. The Vindicator had a red torso and all of its limbs were painted white. As the match started, Jamie was startled by a hand that slapped her back. A brief moment of panic filled her brain until Kylie's laughter hit her ears. "Half a second out of a mech and you're looking for more?" Kylie said as she slid her arm around Jamie's waist. Jamie shrugged, ignored the hand holding her midriff, and replied, "It was on when I came in. Figured I'd be social and watch too." Kylie chortled and said, "I knew you'd learn how to play well with others. All it took was a brutal work schedule and the promise of violence." "Guess you have me pegged," Jamie said, as they both turned their attention to the fight on the holoviewer. The two mechs circled each other, playing up to the viewers. Solaris 7 fights were more than just fights. It was entertainment, and every movement and gesture from the mechs was deliberately intended to curry favor and rile up the crowds. The Vindicator's mech warrior took the first shot when it leveled its PPC and slowed its movement. As if predicting that, the Hatchetman increased its speed at the same time, resulting in the crackling lightning bolt missing its medium mech by several meters. The Hatchetman returned fire with its LB-10X autocannon, which pelted the Vindicator with enough hits to the right torso and arm that it caused the mech to briefly stumble and regain balance. The two mechs continued to trade shots with their long-range weaponry. When the Vindicator launched its LRMs, the Hatchetman used the opportunity to close distance. Medium pulse lasers danced up the Vindicator's leg, shearing off armor plating and leaving blackened scars. Jamie deftly slid away from Kylie and walked to her bunk to change out of her coveralls. She heard the pilots cheer for something and made quick work of getting into a t-shirt and khaki pants. Returning to the group, Jamie could see the Vindicator had the upper hand at this point. The Hatchetman was still advancing, but one of its legs seemed to be jammed. The damage to the knee joint took the form of a smoking electrical tear. Jamie figured that it was the second PPC shot from the Vindicator that must have been the culprit. Wrangled back into the action, Jamie watched as the Vindicator began to move into a path that would take it in a circle around the Hatchetman. Not to be outdone, the Hatchetman's mech warrior fired its LB-10X and medium pulse lasers. They hit true and completely caved in the Vindicator's already damaged right torso. The arm which contained the mech's PPC hung from the Vindicator by torn and burning myomer cable, as it nearly fell off to the rocky ground of the arena. This gave the Hatchetman enough time to bleed off heat from the Alpha Strike, as well as close on the other mech. Forced to stand still just to keep from toppling over, the Vindicator turned to face its opponent and fired both its medium laser and small laser at the approaching Hatchetman. While it did hit and score some damage on the mech's center and left torso, it couldn't stop the shambling advance. The Hatchetman closed within a half dozen meters and lifted its hatchet for a killing blow. Vindicator's pilot tried to shuffle back, however the seriously unbalanced mech was difficult to maneuver. The hatchet came crashing down on the Vindicator's already damaged right torso, cleaving into the center torso at a sharp angle. Jamie felt compelled to cheer along with the other rowdy pilots. The next moments were a foregone conclusion as the Vindicator crumbled. With each subsequent hit with the hatchet, the mech's internal structure crumbled and was smashed into uselessness. The dying mech fired its head-mounted medium laser one more time, but it streaked up into the sky as the mech tumbled and collapsed in upon itself. The Hatchetman lifted its now damaged and largely useless hatchet into the air in a signal of victory, and the holovid ended. "Do you want to get some grub? A good mech fight always makes me hungry," Kylie asked Jamie in a tone that suggested it really wasn't a question. Jamie smiled a bit, sighed, and the two walked down to the chow hall. This is the end of part 4. Again, I appreciate those of you who are sticking it out and seeing where this story takes us. Again, if you have input, feel free to drop it into the comments below. I'm always interested in comments and critique, and I will hopefully see you next time. Take care. Be awesome.